Today on the podcast, we're talking about going full time. What does that mean? What do you need to know to be a full-time musician in your city or your town? We'll see you on the inside. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Songwriters Planner podcast. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Mike. I am the creator of the Songwriters Planner, and I enjoy having you guys here today. Thank you for showing up. I appreciate it. As usual, I always like to say thank you for showing up and how much I appreciate you guys. I really enjoy doing these podcasts, and if you visit here frequently, you hear me say this all the time at the top of my podcast. I really like to repeat it just because I really do appreciate you guys swinging by. If you're new here, thank you for showing up. Hopefully I can provide some kind of value to you as a musician, as an artist, whatever it is that you do. If you're musically inclined like myself, then I hope you find a connection with me, or at least the content that I'm putting out on this podcast. I'd also like to say this podcast is on Spotify and it is on iTunes. So you can, if you listen to those places like I do, you can go there and you can subscribe to my podcast and you'll get notified anytime I have a new episode posted. It's kind of convenient that way. You get the audio only version instead of the video version. So depending on who you are, that might be a good thing. Speaking of video, this is also on my YouTube channel, and I appreciate you folks who have subscribed to my YouTube channel out there. I see the subscriptions going up slowly, very slowly, small, steady, but slow. And you know what? I'll take that. I'm okay with that. So thank you everybody for that. So today, let me jump into the topic. Today, I wanted to talk about being a full-time musician. Now, being a full-time musician is kind of like, I see it as like the mecca of what we would all like to do at some point. I mean, how cool would that be to play music for a living and to write and create music for a living? I mean, it's kind of like the dream that we all have, right? Depending if you're a songwriter, if you're a performer, if you're an instrumentalist, it doesn't really matter. Doing what you love full-time as your quote-unquote job is kind of like the holy grail. And I know for musicians, there aren't many that have not dreamt of that situation. I know I have done it many times. So I'm sure that, I'm like everyone else out there. I really have the same goals to do that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I want to dive into what it takes to be a full-time musician. Now, let's define what that means. There's many different meanings of a full-time musician. You got people who are going out on tour, who do it full-time. Basically, if you're in a band and you're touring and that's your livelihood, that's great. If you have support for that, that's awesome. You can be a session person, someone who goes and does recording sessions and gets paid to do that kind of stuff. Usually you're going to find those kind of musicians in the big music towns like Nashville, like New York City, like Los Angeles, places like that. You can get away with having a career doing that kind of thing. You can be a gigging musician around your city or around your town where you're constantly gigging and you're getting paid to play shows. That is a very common full-time musician scenario. And I have a lot of friends that do that. They actually make a living playing music. Now, they do mostly cover songs, and then they do some original songs in there. So it's kind of a mix of all of those things. But as we jump into the podcast, we'll talk about what you need to know to be a full-time musician, and more primarily focusing on this kind of steady working person, this profile of someone who's working, making money through music, whether you're doing gigs, whether you're doing session stuff, whether you're going out on tour. It all kind of applies. Everything we talk about today applies to this scenario, because no matter where you are, no matter how you're making your money doing music, if you're doing it full time, there's all these things that you need to be thoughtful about and to think about before you take a step into doing this. Now, taking the leap of faith from going, say you have a steady job that you get paid to do, to going into playing music full time is not something that you want to consider lightly. It's not something that you just want to be like, well, you know what, I'm done with this job. I'm going to quit this job and then just go do music full time. It doesn't always happen that way. Usually what happens is that you have a job and you do music on the side, whether you're doing it on the weekends, at nights, and you slowly build up this repertoire of connections, of gigs, of people that you know who might need you to, who may pay you for your musical services. It takes time. It takes some time to build up this to where you get to the point where you can actually, bring income in that allows you to do it full time. Now, it's not easy for everybody, and it's not recommended for everybody because it does take a certain type of commitment. And we're going to talk about a couple of those things today in this podcast. But it's overall, there's many different scenarios as to how you can become a full-time musician. So let's talk about how you would even get started. Well, how would you get started being a full-time musician? Let's say you play some gigs out, you have an acoustic guitar and you're playing gigs out, and every now and then you play a club, or you play a venue, you play an event, or you're a session person, someone who wants to be hired to play music by someone else. How do you even get started? Well, I guarantee that if you are doing music full time, and I'm going to count out the full-time touring people. I'm going to count out the people who have huge tours or touring people. That is one thing that it's a little bit different, because say you're in a band scenario and you're touring and stuff like that. That's kind of a different scenario. If you are doing that full time, then that's great. That's awesome. And there's nothing wrong with going out and hitting up all these places around the country. But the reality is, whether you're touring or not, it doesn't matter. The first thing you want to do is make sure that you can play well and you have a deep library of songs, okay? Because most likely, if you're getting paid to play music, you're not going to always be able to play your own music. You're going to be playing other people's music. You're going to be playing covers, especially if you have, say, a long set to fill, say 2-3 hours, sometimes even 4 hours. Unless you have many songs of yours, which some of you do out there, you're most likely not going to be bringing in a distinguished amount of money to play your own songs for that long. So you want to build up a library, a catalog of songs that you know, whether you're a guitar player, bass player, drummer, singer, doesn't matter. You can fill all scenarios that you know you can play. Learn many, many songs. And this actually, I'm going to bring those touring people back in, because this definitely relates to you as well. So we're going to bring everybody back in. Sorry about casting you guys out there earlier. And this actually really applies, because you can be a touring act and you can be out there playing these long shows, these 2-3 hour gigs. And like I said, you're most likely not going to be playing your own music right off the bat. You're going to have a library of music that you can pull from to make sure you can fill that time, because that's where a lot of the money gigs come from. So make sure you have a good depth of knowledge about many, many songs, not just your own to play. That's the reality of it. I mean, you're going to play covers out there. You're going to play your originals, but you're going to have to play covers. If you're doing this for a living, you got to remember, that's the key here. If you're doing this for a living, you're going to have to maximize your potential to get work. And to get more work, you're going to have to know more songs and know how to fill those kinds of time spaces, okay? Start accepting more gigs if you want to do music full time. Start reaching out. Start getting more shows. You might be working your day job, and then you might be playing Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, maybe even on a Sunday. Once you get that going, you have to take those gigs. You start working more. It can be exhausting and it can be a busy schedule, but if music is what you want to do full time, you're going to have to learn how to take more gigs on, and that means playing multiple nights in a row. Again, in conjunction with your deep library of music, these are things that you're going to have to consider doing. Network with as many people as you can. Other musicians, club owners, coffee shop owners, media people, people who are getting married. You might be playing a wedding, and weddings are good opportunities to get paid, because you can make a lot of money off of weddings. Hey, let's stay honest. But anyways, network with as many people as you can. The more people you know, the more chances you will have of getting more shows and getting paid for these shows. Now, these are specifically, obviously, for show environments. If you also can use networking to get session gigs, to meet other musicians, say they need someone to come in and record a piano part on something, you can do that. If you know these people, if you have a wide network of people that it's in your phone, you have better chances of getting paid for your musical abilities. That's really what it comes down to, is networking like that. Another important thing you want to know before you start is make sure, if you want to do music full time, you got to align your finances. What that means is make sure that you can afford to do music full time. To start off, it may not be a high paying job, or may not even be a middle paying job. You got to make sure that you have your finances set so that you have money saved up, so when you're not getting as much work as you had hoped, because you're relying on your ability to get consistent gigs and consistent consistent tours, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. If you don't have that consistency, then you need to make sure your finances are aligned. You're gonna get good at budgeting your money. When you're in a situation, playing music is not always a stable situation. And getting shows, doing session work, getting a tour, getting a Broadway musical, whatever it is, if you're playing in the pit, it's not always going to be consistent. So make sure you have your finances dialed in and you know how much money you need to clear a month so that you can make music. You might want to dial down your overhead costs. And that means moving into a smaller place. That might mean getting a roommate. It might mean keeping your car, not getting a new one and just getting it fixed. Whatever it is, the finance part of it is very, very important, because that's what's going to allow you to be able to do music full time. Another thing you might want to think about if you want to do music full time, you might have to relocate. You might have to go somewhere where you actually can get more gigs and get more work as a musician. You might have to go to Nashville. You might have to go to the big city. If you're in a smaller town and you just don't have the support to make enough money to do it full time, you might have to relocate. If this is your dream, it's the reality of the way the things are in the world. You got to go to where the business is. You got to have to want to move if that's the case. The bigger cities have more to offer, and they just have more shows available. There may be more studio work. There may be more contacts. There's just more people. So think about what your city provides you as a musician, and if it's going to be okay, if it's going to be enough for you to actually work and do this for full time. There's a lot of places where you just can't get away with it. There's just not enough work for it. So think about relocation if it pertains to you, where you are in your situation. And don't forget, it takes time. It takes time to build up your name to where you're the go-to guy or the gal or band or artist. You're the person they think about. You know, everybody out there who's in this music industry, whether you're national, local, doesn't matter. Everybody has a go-to list. And that go-to list is, when someone needs somebody to do something, who are they going to call? Like Ghostbusters. Who are you going to call? You want to be the person that's on that top 3, top 5 list of people that someone else is going to call if they need something from you. Whether it is a fill-in gig, whether it's something to do recording, whether it's someone who can go on tour, whether it's someone to fill a spot at a show, it doesn't matter. You want to be the person that people think about when they say, oh, I need somebody to do this. Who do I know? Boom, your name is on that top 3 if you can. If you're serious about doing this, this is where you want to be. You want to get to the point where you're the go-to person. Be the go-to person for as many people as possible. So that gives you better chances of getting that gig, getting that session work, or getting called to do the show or whatever it is, the tour. You want to be that person on that list. And it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time to get to be that person, because you have to put your name out there. You got to get out there in the scene. You got to play these shows, you have to network with people, you got to meet many people, and that takes time. But it is possible. That's where you want to be. So let's look at a couple of pros and cons as we finish up here. Going full time. What's a pro about that? Well, it's obvious. You get to play music for a living. How cool is that, right? If you're a musician, then that's something that you always dreamt of. There is nothing better than doing that, getting paid to play, to do the thing that you love. Whether you're creating music, whether you're a producer, whether you're gigging, whether you're touring, whether you're a session person, it doesn't matter. If you love doing it and you can make it your full-time gig, that is the biggest payoff that you can have. you get to play music for a living. I mean, that's why we all do it. That is the biggest pro that you can have. You get to live your dream, so to speak, and it takes time to get to that point. And as you start to achieve this goal of playing music slowly and getting known for that and being able to kind of push away from your job or from whatever it is that brings in money that's not music, it's a good feeling, it's like you're reaching a goal. But on the flip side, what are the downfalls of doing this? You're not going to always have consistent, steady work. Remember that you're not going to be able to just pull a paycheck every week or every month. It just doesn't work that way. I take that back. There are scenarios where you can be a consistent full-time musician working. Like I was saying, there's Broadway shows. You could be a DJ who has a residency somewhere, but nothing really ever lasts as long as we'd like it to when it comes to money and getting paid as musicians. So you're not going to have that consistency like you would as if you'd have a day job, which also means that you need to be good at hustling and scheduling yourself and finding other fill-in situations when these gigs fall apart. Or if people just move on, they just want to move on to something else. You need to be able to have the ability to find more work when you need it. And that's really what it comes down to, is the ability to find more work when you have to. And that means going through your contact list, going through your contact books of club owners, other musicians, and hitting them up. The money's not always there. The money's not always steady. Not every gig pays the same. So you got to leverage the fact that, should I take this gig or should I take this gig? This one pays more, but could lead to more. And you want to make sure you don't piss off people while you make these decisions, because burning bridges is one of the last things you want to do, especially when you're trying to make a living doing music. You need as much support, and you need a bigger web, the biggest web of networking that you can get, so that you have the opportunities to get gigs and turn on a dime, so to speak. There's a lot to it. You'll get better at scheduling. You need to do some scheduling so that you can book gigs and you don't double book yourself, or you don't double book a tour or double book a session and then end up pissing someone off and they never call you again. So I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling, but there's just so many things to think about if you really want to go full time. And it's not just an easy, I'm going to start playing music full time. There's a lot of these things to think about. Basically, just scheduling, communication, have great communicating skills. Make sure you can communicate with people who book you, people who you might be playing with. If you're playing with another artist or another band, you just got to be able to communicate, because when communication breaks down, you risk losing a gig, you risk losing a contact of yours, and that could be future money. It's all about the future money, the next gig. So make sure you have all these things, considering all these things before you do music full time. Now, I don't want to come across and say that you shouldn't be doing it. It's too scary. That is not what I want to say, and I hope that this doesn't sound like that. But as you can tell, I'm very passionate about this, and I really think that it is possible, and I know that there's a lot of people out there that dream of doing it, but we want to be honest with ourselves and say it's going to take a lot of work. It takes work. It just doesn't come to you. It doesn't happen overnight. You have to work at it. It's something you gotta be. Like I said, you want to be the go-to person. You want to be the top 3 on someone else's list of many people, so that they think of you when something comes up, and that could happen anytime. I need a guitar player for this tour. Boom, you want to be that person. I need a drummer for this. Boom, you want to be that person. I need someone to fill in on this gig because this other guy canceled. Who do I know? Boom, you want to be that guy or a gal. Whatever it is, that is what it takes to be a full-time musician. A lot of work, a lot of hustle, but a lot of payoff in the end if you can do it. And you should see the smiles on the people's faces that actually do get to play music for a living. They say it's a lot of work, but they wouldn't rather be doing anything else. And that's pretty much how life works, right? So anyway, thanks for joining me on today's podcast. I really wanted to talk about this subject. Maybe I'll do another one later in the future. Full-time musicians, to all of you out there who are full-time, my hat's off to you. I'm rooting for you. That's an amazing thing. And for all of you who are looking to do full-time musicians, best of luck to you guys as well. It is possible. You can do it. Just put in the work and it will happen. I know it will. All right. We'll see you at the next podcast. It's Mike signing off, Songwriters Planner Podcast. Peace and love.